There are Christians who seem strange to almost everyone around them, and without realizing it, you might be one of them. They are called extreme. They are called antisocial. They are called boring, cold, too religious, too serious. And most of the time, they just quietly accept the label and keep living the way they live. But here is what nobody stops to consider. What if the behavior that looks so strange from the outside is actually one of the most spiritually mature things a person can do? Today, we're walking through 10 behaviors that Christians are quietly judged for every single day. And by the end of this, you may realize that what the world has been calling your weakness is actually your discernment. 1. Christians who don't have many friends. And for most people, that seems like a contradiction. If Christianity is about love and community, should they not be close to everyone? But these people are not cold. They are not arrogant. They have simply learned something that takes most people years to understand. Not every friendship builds you up. Not every circle adds to where God is taking you. I have seen people like this. Quiet, set apart, content, not needing a crowd to feel complete. And the people around them almost always misread it. They assume something is wrong, but something is actually very right. Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers." That is not isolation. That is discernment. That is not rejection of people. That is guarding the heart. The world says having few friends is sad, but sometimes it is the clearest sign that someone has decided to protect their peace, their faith, and the direction God has them walking in. It is not loneliness, it is wisdom. 2. Christians who don't enjoy parties. And in a culture where not going out automatically makes you boring or overly religious, this one gets judged fast. But here is what most people miss. It is not that they do not know how to have fun. It is that something shifted inside them, and the environments that used to feel normal now feel deeply uncomfortable. I have seen people go to a gathering, try to adapt, spend an hour forcing a smile, and leave feeling more drained than when they arrived. Not because they were judging anyone, because that place simply no longer connected with who they are now. 1 Corinthians 10:23 says, "I have the right to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Not everything is constructive." There are environments filled with excess, empty conversation, and things that quietly work against a person's spiritual life. And there are Christians who have made a simple, quiet decision, not out of fear, out of conviction. Because when something no longer feeds your soul, it is not missing out. It is having found something better. 3. Christians who don't help everyone. This one sounds wrong at first. Isn't Christianity built on love and service? How can a Christian choose not to help someone? But here's the part most people are not willing to talk about. Helping also requires discernment. I have seen Christians who said yes to everything, who were always available, who gave and gave until there was nothing left, and who ended up used, exhausted, and dragged into situations that were never theirs to carry. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says, "If anyone is unwilling to work, let him not eat." Matthew 10:14 records Jesus himself telling his disciples that if a place does not receive them, they should shake the dust off their feet and move on. There are people who do not want to change, who reject every offer of genuine help, who come back again and again seeking assistance only to continue in the exact same cycle. And there is a point where helping that kind of situation no longer builds anything. It simply funds the problem. Some Christians have learned to step back, not from lack of love, from an understanding that real help is not always giving. Sometimes it is knowing when to stop. We are only 3 behaviors in, and I want you to notice something. Every single one of these has been misread by the people around them. What looks like a flaw from the outside is something completely different from the inside. The next 7 get even more personal. 4. Christians who don't frequently receive visitors. There are Christians who are very intentional about who they invite into their home, and how often. And in a culture that associates Christian living with open doors and constant availability, this looks cold. But for many of these believers, the home is not just a physical place. It is a spiritual one. I have seen people like this. They keep their home peaceful, calm, in order. And they guard it carefully because they have learned that not everyone contributes to that atmosphere. When someone walks through your door, they bring more than themselves. They bring their way of speaking, the weight they are carrying, the conversations they start, and the atmosphere those conversations leave behind. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Your home is an extension of that. And while the world may see careful hospitality as being unsociable, some people have simply understood that the peace they have built inside those walls is too valuable to leave unguarded. 5. Christians who love being at home. We live in a generation that treats stillness like a problem to be solved. If you are not going out, traveling, posting, or constantly filling your schedule, something must be wrong with you. But there are Christians who have genuinely learned to enjoy being still. They do not feel the need to constantly move, to look for plans every weekend, to fill every empty hour just to feel alive. And they find real satisfaction in the simple things: their home, their space, their quiet. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." That is not just a nice verse for a wall hanging. It is an invitation to a different way of living. I have seen how people who embrace stillness develop a stronger, more stable inner life, because they are not constantly being pulled in 10 directions. They are not against community. They are not hiding from the world. They have simply found something the world is still running around trying to locate: peace that does not depend on noise. 6. Christians who don't use social media. For this generation, choosing not to use social media feels almost radical. Because today, if you are not posting, if you are not online, many people feel like you simply do not exist. But there are Christians who have made a quiet, deliberate decision to opt out, or at least to significantly limit their exposure. Not because they are disconnected or outdated, because they have chosen to protect their mind. Let's be honest about what social media actually does at its worst: comparison, envy, empty content, wasted time, constant noise. All of it entering slowly, without most people even noticing the effect. Philippians 4:8 says, "Think about whatever is true, pure, and praiseworthy." And not everything on a social media feed aligns with that. I have seen people step away from that digital noise and almost immediately find more clarity, more peace, and more time for the things that actually matter to them. It does not mean social media is evil in itself, but not everyone is willing to pay the price it sometimes demands. And choosing not to pay it is not missing out. It is a boundary. 7. Christians who don't follow trends. In a generation where everything is measured by what is trending, the person who does not care about trends stands out immediately. If it is viral, everyone wants to be part of it. But there are Christians who genuinely do not feel that pull, who are not tracking what is popular, who are not adjusting themselves to fit whatever the current moment demands. And that makes them look strange. But here is what is actually happening. They are not disconnected from the world. They are simply not governed by it. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That transformation shows up in small daily decisions, including the decision not to chase what everyone else is chasing, just to feel included. I have seen people who do things they do not even believe in, simply because the social pressure to participate was too strong. But these Christians have settled something inside themselves. Their identity does not come from what is trending. It comes from something that does not change with every news cycle. And that kind of stability, even if it makes people uncomfortable, is a sign of someone who knows exactly who they are. 8. Christians who enjoy being alone. Solitude makes most people nervous. Because our culture associates being alone with sadness, emptiness, or something being wrong. But there are Christians who have learned something rare: how to be alone without being lonely. They do not need to be surrounded by people at all times. They do not depend on constant company to feel complete. And in a world addicted to attention and distraction, that genuinely seems strange. While others fill every quiet moment with noise, these people can sit in silence, think, reflect, pray, and feel genuinely at peace. Jesus himself regularly withdrew from the crowds to be alone with the Father, not because he rejected people, because he understood the value of those moments. Psalm 62:1 says, "Truly, my soul finds rest in God." That kind of rest is most often found in solitude. I have seen how Christians who embrace being alone develop a stronger, more stable inner life. Because they are not constantly outsourcing their sense of self to whatever is happening around them. They do not reject community. They simply do not need it to feel whole. 9. Christians who distance themselves from family. This one is the hardest to talk about, because family is supposed to be untouchable. And the Bible does speak about honoring parents, about love, about unity. But there is a reality not everyone is willing to name. Not every family relationship builds you up. I have seen cases where the family itself became the greatest obstacle to someone's faith, where there was constant mockery of their beliefs, where there was ongoing pressure to return to old habits, where there was a toxic environment that quietly worked against everything God was doing in that person's life. And in those situations, some Christians make the painful decision to create distance. Not because they stopped loving, because they understood they could not grow in the middle of that environment. Jesus addressed this directly in Matthew 10:34-36. He said his message would bring division even within families. He also said that anyone who loves father or mother more than him is not worthy of him. Those are hard words, but they are real. It is not about pride. It is not about thinking you are better. It is about understanding that sometimes stepping back is the only way to protect what God is doing in you. 10. Christians who don't celebrate everything. We live in a world where every occasion is a reason to celebrate. And of course, there are healthy celebrations. Family moments, special occasions, joy shared with people you love. None of that is wrong. But there are other kinds of celebrations. The ones filled with excess, with pressure, with environments that quietly work against everything a person believes. And there are Christians who simply choose not to participate. Not because they are extremists, not because they are against everything, because they have learned to discern what actually benefits them and what does not. Ephesians 5:11 says, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness." 1 Corinthians 10:23 says, "Not everything is beneficial or constructive." I have seen Christians who step away from certain events, knowing that something in that environment will cost them more than the attendance is worth. And that is not being boring. That is being aware. Because there are celebrations that add to your life, and there are ones that quietly take something away. Knowing the difference is not extreme religiosity. It is maturity. 10 behaviors that the world looks at and calls strange. But behind every single one of them is not weirdness. It is a conviction. A genuine desire to honor God in the specific details of how a person chooses to live. Not every behavior that looks strange is wrong. Sometimes it is simply someone living differently because they are following a different set of values than the people around them. And the world has always been uncomfortable with people like that. but those are usually the people God uses the most. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Which of these 10 did you see yourself in most clearly? Drop the number in the comments, because I have a feeling you are not the only one in this audience who has been quietly judged for something that was never actually wrong. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their so-called strange behavior might actually be one of their greatest strengths. And subscribe so we can keep going deeper into what it actually looks like to live this faith without apology. I will see you in the next one.